play and call it work. MiniWarGaming's Faction Focus!
Hey everyone, and welcome to the Necron actual faction focus review. I don't know why I said actual. It's just the faction focus review. This is where we sit down and we color myself because I want company. I don't want to do this alone.
I don't know much about Necron, but I'll try.
No, sorry, Quirk. Anyways, yeah, he's my company. He's pretty much my yes man. I'm gonna say something. He's like, oh yes,
oh yes.
Anyways, this will be a two-part review. For free on YouTube. I'm gonna go over the entire book, all the units, all of their new special abilities, some of their profiles, not all their profiles. If they haven't changed much, I'm not going to bother mentioning it on their profile. Now, if they gained extra wounds, or if they're more strength or less strength, I'll mention something like that. I go over the weapons. So I just go over their weapons, the war gear options for the most part, and their special rules, and what slots they fill. And none of that's really changed too much. So like I start with HQs, we move on to troops, and then elite, fast attack, I believe, or it was like dedicated transports, fast attack. It doesn't matter. We covered it all. We even covered the Lords of War, the Tesseract Vault, and the Obelisk. That's all for free. And now the second part is going to go into the Vault, and that will be the general strategy that I've come up with, or that I've heard online, or that people have told me, such as what armies to build, if I'm facing certain armies. Like if I'm fighting a Horde army, I'll bring a certain list, or if I'm fighting an elite army, I'll bring something else instead. If I'm fighting a vehicle-heavy army, I'll bring this. Or like an all-comers list. Like so far I have a favorite all-comers list for right now, but that could change in a week or two depending on how much I play or what I play. And that will be in the Vault. And if you want to watch that, you can click on the video in the link in the description below, and that will give you a 7-day free trial to be a Vault member, which will let you check out the second part of this review, pretty much the second part of everyone's review for everyone's faction focus, and in addition, all of the new 8th edition battle reports we're pumping out, because again, for every one battle we do, we throw a second one in the Vault for our Vault members.
Plenty of stuff in there for you guys.
Yeah. Now, we're going to move on to the first part of the review. Alright, folks. We finally have our Necron review. As you can see, we have everything laid out here for you. We are going to do the entire army, essentially, starting HQs, troops, fast attack, elite, heavy support. We're going to start with the special rules, though. A quick overview. There's not a lot here. Living metal being one of them. At the beginning of your turn, the unit with living metal recovers 1 wound lost earlier in the battle. That usually only pertains to the characters out in the front here, as you can see them. And each vehicle has a living metal special rule as well. So it's nice to know everything's going to have a consistent wound back every turn. Next would be the big one, the reanimation protocols. Every infantry unit, or pretty much anything that I didn't already point at, has reanimation protocols except for the Catan. Now, reanimation protocols works like this. At the beginning of your turn, you roll a d6 equal to the amount of missing models in the unit. For every roll of a 5-up, you get to re-add or reinforce that unit with the models that had been earlier slain. Now, these models do have to be placed within coherency of the remaining models in that unit before you reanimated, and they have to be an inch away from enemy models. I think I strongly prefer this to the previous edition. It's not as, I don't think it's as overpowered, but it's still stronger than you'd think it would be. It's deceptively strong, especially later on in the game when you're really struggling to take out units. You're going to want massive blobs of warriors. The bigger the unit, the harder it is to remove, the more reanimation protocols you'll pump out. Another thing that actually changed was the powers of the Catan. There's only 3 of them now instead of 6, and you're able to choose. You still keep the antimatter meteor, the times arrow, and the seismic assault. They do ideally the same thing. With the antimatter meteor, you roll a d6 on a 2-up. The closest visible enemy unit within 24 inches suffers d3 mortal wounds. Times arrow, you pick 1 unit within 24 inches, roll a d6. If the result is higher than the unit's wound characteristics, 1 model from that unit is slain. So essentially, target 1 wound models, you roll a d6, anything higher than 1, they lose a model. If you can somehow find a character, and they only have 3 or 4 wounds, you can snipe a character. Seismic Assault, you roll a d6 for each model in the closest enemy unit within 24 inches of the shard, and then for each roll of a 6, they suffer a mortal wound. That's my favorite. That's pretty much the gist of the special rules. Everything else is based on unit to unit. I'll start with HQs. And we will start with the Overlord. The Overlord, between the Overlord and the Cryptek, they're both critical. The Cryptek, I would say, is more so important, but the Overlord has an ability called My Will Be Done. And a lot of the special named character Overlords have this ability as well. Essentially, at the beginning of each of your turns, you choose a friendly infantry unit within 6 inches of this model, and you add one to the advance, charge, and hit rolls for that unit until the beginning of your next turn. Now that affects shooting and melee. That could be a big deal. And for his point cost, I would say it's worth it. Other than that, you still buy him a War Scythe. He's hitting on 2s now, which is beautiful. Still strength 5 base. He's got 5 wounds. He does exactly what he did before, essentially. And you can buy them Resurrection Orbs as well. Now, Resurrection Orb is a one-time use still. And then you choose a unit. You pick a unit with Resurrection Orb. Immediately after you have made your reanimation protocols, you may make another one within, I'm not reading this one probably, guys. If this model has a Resurrection Orb once per battle, like I said, immediately after you have made your reanimation protocols roll, you can make another one for a friendly unit within 3 inches. As simple as that. If you feel like your one reanimation wasn't good enough, you pop your orb and do another one, but he has to be within 3 inches. And he's come stocked with a phase shifter, so he's got a 4-up invulnerable save. Next, we'll go to the Cryptek. The Cryptek, I would say, is the backbone of the army, as it was last edition. The Cryptek, as well as all the other Cryptek named characters, have the Technomancer special ability, which adds 1 to all reanimation protocol rolls for models with within 3 inches of the Cryptek. So all Crypteks have this, all the named Crypteks have this. Some are, I'd say none are better than any others. You can't augment it better than a 4-up also. I should have stated that. Reanimation protocol stops at a 4-up. There's no Crypteks that are better at doing it. They all do it the same. And they all come stock with a Chronometron as well, which gives them a 5-up invulnerable save against ranged weapons. Now, Orkin the Diviner just gives a base 4-up invulnerable save against everything for the nearest infantry unit, whereas the Chronometron's only for shooting, and you still have to remain within 3 inches, but that's fine. Actually, yeah, no, 3 inches, but that's fine, just because that's the range for the reanimation protocols increase as well with the Technomancer. They still come with a Staff of Light. They haven't actually changed much other than having 4 wounds, which is custom with the new edition. Still, incredibly necessary to have Crypteks in your army. Next is the Lord. The Lord, as you would expect, is just a mini Overlord. Nothing special. He doesn't have, except instead of having My Will Be Done, he's got the Lord's Will, which allows you to fail failed morale tests within 6 inches of this model. But everything in the Necron army being Leadership 10 won't be that relevant. He doesn't have a phase shifter, and he can buy a Resurrection Orb. But other than that, same stats as an Overlord, just a little bit worse. I probably wouldn't bring too many Lords in my list unless I wanted to have a smaller point game, or if I wanted a cheaper HQ, simply because a Lord is cheaper than an Overlord. And finally, for the stock Lords, I'm not covering all the name characters, we have a Destroyer Lord, which is kitted out to mostly help out Destroyers, whereas the Overlord helps all infantry. The Destroyer Lord only affects Destroyers. His little built-in ability is United in Hatred, and you are able to reroll wound rolls of 1 in the shooting phase, only the shooting phase, for this model and models, friendly Destroyer models within 6 inches of him. I personally don't play Destroyers a lot. I don't know how they're going to do in the new edition. I think I prefer the Overlord in almost any situation, except toughness 6 on a Destroyer Lord still, which is a big deal, as opposed to the toughness 5 on a normal Overlord. He still has a phylactery. You can buy Resurrection Orbs. You can buy him a War Scythe. He does have Hardwired Hatred, though, which all Destroyers have, which I'll get to afterwards. You reroll hit rolls of 1 for this model, for melee and shooting. Though a Destroyer Lord has a phylactery, so Living Metal, which we discussed in the beginning, lets you gain a wound back at the beginning of your turn. A phylactery augments that to be D3 wounds instead of just 1. So you still could just get the 1 wound, but you could get more. So the Destroyer Lord, in all senses, is more durable than an Overlord, except his little built-in like command ability almost doesn't affect anything else but destroyers. Since I'm not covering the named characters, I will cover the Catacomb Command Barge. It hasn't changed too much. Its wave of command, it's got a wave of command ability, which is my will be done. Same ability as the Lord has, except it's got a 12-inch bubble instead of a 6-inch bubble, and that's pretty much it. It's got, though it has quantum shielding. Quantum shielding is a special rule of, I might as well cover it now. It's on all the vehicles. It's not an army-wide special rule. It's just built into all the vehicles. This is one of the biggest changes I like for the vehicles. It makes them, it's deceptive in a way that you can only really hurt the vehicles with smaller arms fire, because with quantum shielding, each time this model suffers damage from an unsaved wound, roll a d6. If the result is less than the damage inflicted by the attack, the damage is ignored, flat out. So if the model suffers 4 damage, you can then roll a 3 or less and the damage is ignored. Specifically good against, I don't know, a unit like a Wraith Knight or an Imperial Knight where their Chainsword or their Wraith Blade automatically just does 6 damage per swing. All you have to do is roll under a 6. On a d6, all that damage is negated. And yes, it does work in melee as well as shooting. So heavy weapons like las cannons or melta, anything like that, will have almost no effect against Necron vehicles. Whereas small arms fire like plasma, being strength 7, minus 3 AP, 1 damage, very hard. It almost always get through. Plasma is a pretty hard counter to the quantum shielding. Finally, the backbone of the army, the troops. Still my favorite in the army. The Necron warriors are so efficient, it's crazy. Not much has changed. They have their reanimation protocols, and they have their Gauss flare. It's a lot like the bolter still, except it's so much better. It's rapid fire 1, 24-inch range still, so rapid fire range at 12, strength 4, AP minus 1. They took out the Gauss rule essentially and replaced it with higher AP. Anything that had the Gauss rule is now just flat out great at getting through armor, which I feel is it just, I don't know, it symbolizes what it's supposed to do in the fluff. And it's near unstoppable. These guys can get through anything if you pump enough shots into it. You max out squads of 20, you get them in rapid fire range, it's 40 shots a unit, all at strength 4, which is wounding, well, most vehicles on 5s, and then they get -1 of their save. Like, of course, a vehicle with toughness 8 is being wounded on a 6, which is no different than the previous edition. And like I said, -1 of their save. And their points actually went down, which is a rare thing in this edition. Everything is usually more expensive. They're only 12 points a model now, as opposed to their 14. Might as well do the Immortals next. The only other troop in the book. They largely remain the same with their Gauss blasters. It's still strength 5, except it's AP -2, as opposed to the normal -1 it might have been. But with the Gauss being gone, AP -2. Still 24-inch range, rapid fire 1. Not much to change about the Immortals. Both Immortals and Warriors hit on 3-ups in combat, which is a very nice change. Very nice change, sorry. They still keep their 3-up armor save. The Warriors still keep their 4-up armor save. And with the new formations, they require you to spam troops. Especially the battalion detachment, which requires you 3 troop choices. I would have no trouble filling that out. I would be happy spending all my points on troops if I wanted to. Of course, the Tesla changes are something worth mentioning. Tesla carbines are now Assault 2 instead of Assault 1 as they previously were. So 2 shots per Tesla gun. At first, this kind of caught my eye. I played with it for a while. I'm not too sure how after a couple games, I reverted back to the Gauss blasters just because the AP -2 is awesome and so reliable, whereas Tesla still has no AP. But they brought back the ability to overwatch on 6s and still gain the benefit of Tesla. So it's the same thing. Each roll of a 6-up with this weapon causes 3 hits instead of the normal 1. So essentially you're just adding 2 hits to its normal previous hit. Still strength 5. It's only 1 damage like everything else, but no AP. After a few games with it, I've decided to go back to the blaster. Though Tesla would easily be better against hordes. It depends if you're a bunch of Hormagaunts, I'd much rather have a squad of 10 Immortals with Tesla. So they're still good in certain situations. Generally, the blasters I feel are better. Next, I'll move on to Lich Guard. Moving on to elites. Lich Guard, the biggest change on them right off the bat, 2 wounds. And they're more expensive, but not so much. I believe they are 21 points a model base. You buy them a war side that puts them up to 30. And I can't quite remember their point cost each with a dispersion sword. I meant hyperface sword and dispersion shield. It puts them up to 39 points as opposed to the 30 with a war scythe. The biggest change with the dispersion shield is it's a 4-up instead of a 3-up now. I mean, what can you do? It's a 4-up invulnerable save is still nothing to scoff at. It's just not as overpowered as a 3-up used to be. And they have a built-in ability called Guardian Protocols. So roll a d6 each time a friendly character loses a wound whilst they're within 3 inches of the Lich Guard unit. On a 2-up, the model from the Lich Guard unit can intercept that hit, and the character does not lose a wound, but the Lich Guard suffer a mortal wound instead, which isn't bad. They have 2 wounds a pop, and it pretty much gives characters a 2-up lookout sir against, well, snipers, I would assume for the most part, or deep striking guys behind that can still shoot your characters. Other than that, that's pretty much the Lich Guard. They're hitting on 3s, which is a nice change. Pretty much anything that was listed weapon skill 4 is hitting on 3s in this edition, it seems. Next will be the Death Marks. Biggest change with the Death Marks is their Synaptic Disintegrator. Pretty much, it's not counted as being a Gauss weapon anymore. It's AP 0. That I'm not a big fan of. That kind of sucks. But it's still a sniper. It can target characters. And if you roll a 6-up for this weapon while wounding, it suffers a mortal wound like all the other sniper weapons. They keep their hunters from hyperspace, so during deployment you can set it up in a hyperspace oubliette instead of placing them on the battlefield. And at the end of any of your movement phases, you can set them up onto the battlefield anywhere 9 inches away from an enemy. And they kept their interception rule as well, where an enemy unit is set up from like pretty much a deep strike reserves. I can immediately set up a unit of Death Marks that was set up in hyperspace anywhere more than 9 inches away from that enemy models. Sorry, anywhere more than 9 inches away from an enemy model and within 12 inches of the enemy unit that has been set up. So you don't even have to choose the enemy that deep strike. You just have to be within 12 inches of them and more than 9 inches away from anyone else. And then you can make a shooting attack with this unit as if it was a shooting phase. But it has to target the enemy unit that had just come in from deep strike. The only nice thing about that is the fact that you don't scatter. You come in exactly where you want to come in, and you get to make attack against this unit that showed up. Which isn't bad for like Terminator characters that come in deep striking, but there's no rend on the weapon. It is still rapid fire 1, 24-inch range. I wouldn't count on it though, it wouldn't be that reliable. Though I suppose if it has some AP, it would be better at killing characters. Maybe that'd be too strong. I'm not too sure. I've never really liked Death Marks. I'll move on to Flayed Ones though. Now, I like the Flayed Ones. Flayed Ones, they lost their fear ability, but they kept it in a different rule called Flesh Hunger. When your opponent takes a morale test for an enemy unit within 3 inches of any Flayed Ones, they must add 1 to their morale check roll. So essentially, if they do flee, 1 more guy is going to flee, or if they weren't going to flee, you might make 1 guy flee, which is, I don't know. Fear never really came up that much in the previous edition. This might come up more often. They're same thing, weapon skill hitting on a 3-up because they had weapon skill 4 last edition. They actually have ballistic skill 6-up, so if they're ever shooting anything, they're hitting on a 6. They kept their strength and toughness 4, and instead of their 3 attacks base, they have 4 attacks base now. But they kind of lost the bonus for having the 2 Flayed One claws. So during a charge, they wouldn't be 5 attacks. Now they're 4 attacks at all times, which is really great because that's what they were before. And their Flayer claws are just strength user, so strength 4. AP 0, damage 1, and you can reroll all failed wound rolls for this weapon, so it's still got the Shred special rule, or the previous Shred special rule. And finally, their little deep strike thing, Haunting Horrors. You can put them in a charnel pocket dimension instead of placing them on the battlefield, and then at the end of any of your movement phases, they crawl out into reality more than 9 inches away from an enemy unit. Again, more consistent deep striking with a unit that has a whole lot of attacks, could cause a lot of damage in the back line. Moving on. Next elite, go on to the Praetorians, the faster Lich Guard. Same stat line as Lich Guard, and again, 1 wound to 2 wounds. I love it. Big deal. They keep their Rod of the Covenant. The Rod of the Covenant is Assault 1 still, 12-inch range, Strength 5, AP -3. so still giving Terminators and Marines a hard time. And you can change out their war gear to be a Particle Caster or a Void Blade, which is the pistol and little hand dagger thing. It looked a little weird. The Void Blade is Strength User in combat, so Strength 5, and it's still -3 AP, which is pretty good because the Rod of the Covenant in melee is the exact same. Whereas the Void Blade before had the always wounding on a 6, I believe, special rule. I can't, an optic strike, it doesn't really matter, previous edition. Now the Void Blade is just as good as the Rod of Covenant in shooting. So I pretty much everyone built their Praetorians with the Rod of the Covenant, though I believe the Particle Caster and Void Blade would be better, just because the Particle Caster is a pistol. Pistol 1, Strength 6, AP nothing, Damage 1, but you can use it in the shooting phase if you're locked in combat. Though the Rod of the Covenant is way better at AP. It's a tough call. It's whatever you prefer, whatever situation you're in. I'm a big fan of the pistol changes, so maybe I prefer to have units that have pistols now. I'm not too sure. And they kept their fearless rule. They automatically pass morale checks all the time with a purpose unshakable. And of course, they have fly because they were jump units in the previous edition, so they're getting around fast and they can charge flyers and back off and shoot their guns. They can disengage from combat, shoot their guns still. And that's pretty much it with them. And the next elite Triarch Stalker, which is pretty much a Praetorian in a big spider, is a big old vehicle. Now, before it allowed infantry units within, I believe, 6 inches of it to add +1 of their ballistic skill. Now, it's pretty good. It's targeting relay. You can reroll hit rolls of 1 for any friendly Necron unit, just any unit, doesn't have to be infantry, that makes a shooting attack against a unit that has already been attacked by any Triarch Stalkers in the space. So if you spam Triarch Stalkers, you can just put their shots around, and all you have to do is attack them. You don't have to hit them, you don't have to wound them, you just have to declare an attack. So it's essential that you take a shot with a Triarch Stalker immediately before you shoot with anything else. It just lets you reroll ones. I mean, that's just a nice little ability. Triarch Stalkers aren't that expensive, and they have a whole big option of weapons they could take. They can still take their Heat Ray, which is Flamer at 8 inches, heavy D6, automatic hits, Strength 5, AP -1 damage. And then you can focus it, which is the same thing as a Melta. It's pretty much got the Melta profile, except it's quite different now. It's 24 inches, heavy 2, Strength 8, -4, D6 damage. And you get to roll the 2 dice and choose the highest result. You could buy it a Particle Shredder, which was the previous Large Blast. It's 24 inches. It's heavy 6 now. Strength 7, -1 AP, D3 damage. So pretty good against vehicles, elite troops. And again, the twin heavy Gauss cannon is now twin, so it's not twin linked. It's got 2 shots, 36-inch range, heavy 2, Strength 9, -4 AP, D6 damage. Great tank, great armor buster. You could, if you really needed to, take out a big threat, or just shoot its guns at any infantry you need to take out. We'll still do damage to that. And if they gave him melee weapons now, actually, so he's got massive forelimbs, which are the little 2 things out front, I suppose. And it's just Strength User, which is 7, by the way. -1 AP, D3 damage. And yeah, you can replace the Heat Ray with a Particle Shredder or a Twin Heavy Gauss Cannon. It's got its own Quantum Shielding built in. Of course, like I said before, roll a D6. If it's under the amount of damage caused, you can ignore all damage. Makes it very durable at 10 wounds. Next will be the Catan. We'll start with the Shard of the Nightbringer. He's got access to the powers of the Catan, which you'd expect, and you're allowed to choose them now. He still has his 4-up invulnerable save through Necrodermis, and Reality Unravels, which is I can't remember what it was in the previous edition, except essentially when it dies, roll a d6 before removing it from the battlefield. On a 4-up, the Necrodermis tears a hole in reality, and each unit within 3 inches of it suffers D3 mortal wounds. It still has its Gaze of Death, which is now a shooting attack, which you can use in addition to powers of the Catan. It's Assault D6. It always wounds on a 2-up, no matter what, unless it's against vehicles, which is a 6-up, and it's -4 AP, D3 damage. Will tear through elite infantry. Terminators won't stand a chance. And then its weapon is the Scythe of the Nightbringer, which is -4 AP, D6 damage a swing, and it's always wounding on a 2-up, unless it's targeting a vehicle, in which case it uses a strength of 7, which is, usually most vehicles are toughness 7 now, so it'll be wounding vehicles on 4-ups for the most part. 5-up on any heavier vehicle. That's pretty much the basic Nightbringer. We can move on to the Deceiver, which is same idea with the Necrodermis, 4-up invulnerable save. It has access to powers of the Catan. It can choose any power it wants. Reality Unravels, where if it's ever reduces 0 wounds, roll d6, 4-up, units within 3 inches take mortal wounds. Now, Grand Illusion is changed a little bit for the better at the beginning of your first battle round, but before the turn begins, you can remove the Catan Shard of the Deceiver or up to D3 other friendly Necron units from the battlefield, then set them up again more than 12 inches away from an enemy models. You bring your Deceiver, and you can pretty much scout up D3 of your army 12 inches away from your enemy model. So you could take a unit of warriors, put them 12 inches away, and now they're all rapid firing, or most of them are rapid firing. In fact, they're all rapid firing because they can move up their 5 inches, which I forgot to mention. All Necron infantry are pretty much a 5-inch move now, instead of 6-up, so they're a little bit slower. I have yet to bring a Shard of the Deceiver. I plan on bringing him a lot. I love the idea of the Necrons canceling. Their biggest weakness is that they're slow. So you cancel that out, and then all of a sudden they're that much better. One final thing, he's got Dread. Your opponents must add 1 to morale test for any enemy units within 12 inches of the Catan Shard of the Deceiver. So he's got a pretty big 12-inch bubble, big fear bubble. That's it for elites, though. That's all the elites in the army. We'll move on to dedicated transports, which will start with the Ghost Ark, the most infamous one. It's got a whopping 14 wounds. Big amount of wounds on him. Only toughness 6. Most of the Necron vehicles are toughness 6, which makes them easy to wound with the Plasma. Plasma being strength 7. Choose through Necron vehicles. It's strength 7 minus 3 AP, so I get no armor save. The only thing I can rely on realistically is the quantum shielding, but Plasma only does 1 damage a turn. So if you can somehow spam Plasma at a Necron vehicle, it's going to go down in a couple turns. Though you might have a chance to run it away out of line of sight so it can heal up a little bit. Essentially, if you're only doing 1 or 2 damage a turn to it, it won't matter because it's got living metal. Now it's got fly, as it was a skimmer last edition, and it now flies. So if it's ever charged, it can simply just back off, and it can shoot all of its guns because there's no firing arcs anymore. So the Gauss flare arrays are rapid fire 5, so they can just fire from any angle. It doesn't matter. Being rapid fire 5, each side has 10 shots within 12 inches because it's 24-inch range. It's still strength 4, minus 1 AP, 1 damage, and it's not open topped. That's probably the biggest nerf it took. So the 10 warriors you bring inside can't shoot out of it anymore. Other than that, though, the Repair Barge acts exactly like a Resurrection Orb, except you can do this multiple times throughout the game. You can make Reanimation Protocol rolls for any slain models from units embarked on a Ghost Ark, so you can heal the ones inside as well. You just make a Reanimation Protocol roll for them. Otherwise, in addition, at the end of each of your movement phases, you can make Reanimation Protocol rolls for any slain models from a single Warriors unit, so they still only target Warriors within 3 inches of the Ghost Ark. And you cannot use this ability on a unit that has already been targeted with a Resurrection Orb this turn. So you could spam Repair Barge. You can still spam Repair Barges on units. So you could have a big block of 20 Warriors and 2 Ghost Arks behind it, and just spam it with Repair Barge to get it up to maximum, get it closer to maximum, unit maximum. I can't remember, am I saying the words here? The maximum capacity of the unit is what I'm trying to say. You guys understand. That's pretty much it for that. We'll move on to the next dedicated transport, which is the Night Scythe. Actually, it's technically a flyer. It's not a dedicated transport anymore. So we're moving on to flyers. Not a dedicated transport, but it has its invasion beam still, which is... It's a weird one. So when you set this model up on the table, because flyers aren't in Deep Strike anymore, at the same time, you can also set up any number of infantry units on their tomb world. So instead of putting it in Deep Strike Reserve, you set up any number of infantry models you want in Deep Strike Reserve. So it helps you get the first turn by cutting down the amount of drops you have in the game. And before it moves in each of your movement phases, a single unit that was set up in their tomb world can be beamed onto the battlefield by a Night Scythe. And then to do so, you set up the unit so it's wholly within 3 inches of the Night Scythe and more than 1 inch away from the enemy. And then if the Night Scythe is destroyed, or any Night Scythes you have are destroyed, everything that was left on the tomb world is also destroyed. In addition, if you don't bring them in by the 4th turn, they're also destroyed. It's got its Tesla Destructor, which is just Assault 4. Oh, sorry, it's got 2 Tesla Destructors. This is not twin Tesla Destructor. It's 2 Tesla Destructors. So it's essentially, which is better because then you can just target them at different. Oh, I guess it doesn't matter. Yeah, Assault 4. So it's essentially Assault 8, Strength 7, same Tesla rule, and it's only damage 1, no AP. Not that great. It's good against hordes. It can maybe strip a few wounds off a vehicle. Other than that, most things will have a 2-up or a 3-up save against it. It's going to be hard to get through. The Doom Scythe, which we don't have out, it is pretty much the other kit of the Night Scythe. You just swap out the guns for the Doom Scythe gun. And even so, it still gets, sort of the invasion beams become the little prism crystal. Anyways, it's got Death Ray. Death Rays turn into 24-inch range, heavy D3, strength 10, -4 AP, D6 damage. Just pretty much flat out, nothing crazy there. Both the flyers have the airborne rule, so the Doom Scythe and the Night Scythe. They cannot charge, and they can only be charged by units that can fly, and can only attack or be attacked in the fight phase by units that can fly. So I think one of the best thematic changes is anything with an assault, any assault units or anything that could jetpack or jump before can just go and jump up and attack flyers now. It's got hard to hit like most other flyers. Subtract 1 from hit rolls made against this model for the shooting phase, and they both have supersonic, yes. Each time this model moves, you first pivot it on the spot up to 90 degrees, and then move the model straight forward. Note that this cannot pivot again after the initial pivot. When this model advances, increases its move characteristic by 20 inches. So its move characteristic is 20 to 60, so it could be 80 inches. You can move up to 80 inches, which is a little ridiculous. You probably won't need that. And then, of course, Crash and Burn for both flyers. If this model is ever reduced to 0 wounds, roll a d6 before moving into the battlefield on a roll of a 6-up. It crashes in a fiery explosion, and each unit within 6 inches suffers d3 mortal wounds. And it, again, also has 2 Tesla Destructors, which are Assault 4, Strength 7, 1 damage. The Tesla ability, where you get 3 hits instead of 1 for a roll of a 6 to hit. Fast attack time, that's all the flyers the Necrons have. Can Optic Wraiths, top of the list. They were a nuisance last edition. I'm sure everyone remembers or agrees, or maybe they disagree. They have 3 wounds now instead of the 2. Anything that pretty much had 2 wounds before went up to 3, I'd say. Not in every situation, but like all bikes are 2 wounds now. Terminators are 2 wounds. The Terminators that were 2 wounds are 3 wounds, like Paladins or Obliterators and Mutilators. Not that they're really Terminators, but this is about Necrons. They are still Strength 6, still Toughness 5. They got the 3 wounds, sorry. They keep their Movement 12, and they keep their Wraith form, which is their 3-up and vulnerable save. These guys keep their 3-up and vulnerable save, and they move across models and terrain as if they were not there. They don't have fly or anything like that. They're just beasts. And they come with no weapon, except they can take a particle caster, which is the same pistol that the Praetorians have, which strength 6, AP nothing, 1 damage. But again, a pistol in combat is cool. It's weird imagining these guys having a pistol. It's just something they put under their belly. Or they can get the Transdimensional Beamer, which before had the instant death special rule on a 6. Now it's just heavy D3, strength 4, AP -3, and 1 damage. These I'm going to try out. I really want to try out these Transdimensional Beamers because they are heavy D3 shots. So you get a squad of 6 of them. That's 6 heavy D3 shots at strength 4, -3 AP. And then every wound roll is 6 up for this weapon. They suffer a mortal wound in addition to the other damage. They are 14 points for a Transdimensional Beamer, though, on top of the Wraith point cost. I think that puts them at about 49 points a Wraith, I believe. Actually puts them up to 52 points a model. So they are a little expensive at a 6-man squad. You could simply just keep their basic weapon, which is the Vicious Claws. It's just strength user, so 6, and -1 AP, 1 damage. Whip Coils in this edition simply give you, if you're familiar with the Khorne Bloodbound and Age of Sigmar, the Blood Warriors, when they die, they get to attack first. So if the bearer is slain in the fight phase before it has made its attacks, leave the model where it is. When its unit is chosen to fight in that phase, it can do so as normal. And once it is done so, remove the model from the battlefield. So again, with a 3-up and vulnerable save and 3 wounds, these guys are pretty tough to take out. You simply have to avoid any characters that could smite them, or at least keep them out of range of smite. But then getting them in melee with nasty guys too could be an issue. I think they're still pretty good. They just don't have the reanimation protocol, feel no pain they had previous edition. That's pretty much it for them. Yeah, nothing really new with them other than that. Actually, they didn't change. The only thing that really changed was +1 wound and the whip will change. Next, for fast attack, we have Scarabs, which have had a couple nice changes. They're cheaper. Instead of 20 points a model in 7th edition, they're actually 13 points a model now. And they always wound on a 5-up. Is their weapon's called Feeder Mandibles. They're strength user, so 3, AP 0, damage 1. If the target's toughness is higher than this attack's strength, this weapon always wounds on a 5-up. And one of the nicest changes, they had weapon skill 5 previously. They decided to give them weapon skill 3 up in this edition. So they have 4 attacks each, all hitting on 3 up, always wounding on a 5 up. They could swarm something big down very easily. They got no AP on their weapon, but they got a whole bunch of attacks. Now the only thing that changed, the only thing that was really good about them before though was the fact that spiders could increase their unit size. Now simply the Canoptic spiders can only like reinforce. So say you bought a squad of 6, you can only add, say they lost 1, you can bring them back up to 6. Or they lost 2, you can bring them up to 5, then up to 6. But you can never get them higher than what you paid for, which is what you're seeing pretty much across the board for the new edition. If you want to increase it past its maximum size, you have to pay for it. Or if you want to summon something new, you got to pay for it. Next is Tomb Blades. These guys became very expensive. So first and foremost, their twin-link Gauss blasters are now simply 2 different Gauss blasters you have to pay for. Those being 9 points a model. You're paying 18 points plus their base cost, which is 24 points base. So you add 18 on that, and you're looking at, what was that, 50? No, not 52. 42. 42 just with the weapons. And then you want to add shield veins, and you want to add Shadow Loom and Nebular Scope, which they all still have still. The Shadow Loom being a straight up 5 of invulnerable save. So they pretty much, everything that could drink before has an invulnerable save. They have to do a little special stipulation though, like the Raven Wing have to flat out, I believe, to get a Jinx save. Whereas these guys just have it built in. They're always going to have a 5 up invulnerable save. If you pay the 5 points for Shadow Loom, which I believe it's worth it. But the fact that these guys are almost 60 points a model now kind of is a turnoff, as opposed to their 20 something before. They were 17 points base in the previous edition, and all their upgrades are like 1 or 2 points, the weapons being free. Yeah, they're like a 22 point model, now they're 60 points. They get twice the amount of firepower, each model, and they do have 2 wounds each, and they do have a 3-up save, 5 of invulnerable, and they do have reanimation protocols. So if you do reanimate, you buy a squad of 6, you lose 2, and you make 2 reanimates, then yeah, you get your bikes back. I haven't tried them yet. I will like to try them. I'll, of course, give them a chance and see how I like them. The Nebular Scope, though, it just ignores cover save, or ignores the save units get from being in cover. But their Ghost Blasters are already -2 AP, and you have to choose between Shadow Loom and Nebuloscope still. So it's either you ignore cover saves, or you give them a 5 of invulnerable save. I think it's almost always worth to give them the 5 of invulnerable save, as opposed to ignoring cover saves, just because their Ghost Blasters are still Rapid Fire 1, they have 2 of them, so that's 4 shots in Rapid Fire range, that's Strength 5, -2 AP. They kept their Tesla Carbine, same thing, it's Assault 4 now, or 2 weapons with Assault 2. Strength 5, AP nothing, damage 1. Or the Particle Beamer now, which is 24 inches, Assault 3, Strength 6. So it used to be the Small Blast, now it's just simply Assault 3, Strength 6, but no AP, no special ability, just 1 damage. The Ghost Blasters, I think, are still the all-star here, being -2 AP the big factor. Because Strength 5 is going to be wounding almost everything on a 3-up. Sorry, almost all vehicles on a 5-up, infantry on 3-up. But still, their toughness 5 still, their price is just so high. The next fast attack will be Destroyers. Now these guys had preferred enemy in the previous edition, which was rerolling hits of 1 and rerolling wounds of 1. Now they only have Hardwired Hatred. You can reroll hit rolls of 1 for this unit. Just like the Destroyer Lord, you get to reroll hit rolls of 1 in the shooting and melee for these guys. And if you have a Destroyer Lord and he activates his little Lord ability, targeting them, they get to reroll wound rolls of 1 for the shooting only. But you need the Destroyer Lord to get the full effect that you would for the last edition. Now their weapons, they still have the Gauss Cannon, which is now, it still had 2 shots, heavy 2. And they do ignore the heavy, they have repulsor platforms. This unit can move and fire heavy weapons without suffering a penalty to their hit roll. So they're still hitting on 3-ups when they move with their heavy weapon with a move of 10. They move far and they move fast. Strength 5, minus 3 AP, D3 damage each. So each one of those has 2 shots that could do D3 damage each. They could rip vehicles apart as well. And if you do have a Destroyer Lord, then they're rerolling 1s to wound. Not a bad thing to consider. They're not the worst, and their points aren't that bad. One thing I should probably mention is their wounds 3. They went from 2 wounds to 3 wounds, like the race went from 2 wounds to 3 wounds as well. Kept their toughness 5, kept their 3-up armor save. And that's pretty much it. I think they're still pretty good. Though, I should mention that they are 43 points a model. I don't know if I said they were still kind of cheap before. They're 43 points base. You add the Gauss cannon for 20 points, and then you're looking at a 63-point model. This one model is 63 points. You bring them in a squad of 3, you're looking at 189 points. It's not cheap, to say the least, but they are effective if you're fighting something elite, or just heavily armored, or just a bunch of wounds. These guys could probably take out a Night Titan very easily. They have the option for heavy destroyers still, which is everything's the same, except they take a heavy Gauss cannon, which is what the Triarch Stalker uses. It's strength 9, heavy 1, minus 4 AP, and D6 damage. So pretty much twice as good as the normal cannon. Essentially, yeah, twice as good. 2 more 8, well, no, it's minus 4 AP instead of minus 3, but D6 damage. And they still have the repulsor platform, so they can fire their heavy Gauss cannon at ballistic skill 3, rerolling 1s to hit. So pretty consistent with these guys actually, but they are expensive because the heavy Gauss cannon is, I believe, 33 points instead of 20 points. You're looking at like almost a 75 point, it's about a 75 point model. Heavy support, Canoptic Spider. It's the hole that used to fill in 7th edition doesn't really exist anymore. It fills a completely different one. It used to do some of this stuff before, but now it does it so much better in the fact that it has Gloom Prism. This is the only model in the Necron army that can deny psychic powers. If you want a chance to survive a nasty psychic phase, or if you maybe want to bring one every game just to have the chance to deny psychic powers, you have to bring a Spider. That's the only thing that can do it. And they still have their Fabricator Claw rate, which you have to buy all this. Well, actually, no, you don't, sorry. At the end of your movement phase, a model equipped with a Fabricator Claw array can repair a single vehicle within 1 inch, so you have to be pretty close, and that model will regain D3 wounds lost early in the battle, and it can only be repaired once per phase. You actually do have to buy the Fabricator Claw array. I double checked, 8 points for that, and which would bring the Canoptic Spider up to about 76 points base. So you buy the Claw array, then you have to buy the Gloom Prism, and then if you want to buy him the guns, which he can have Particle Beamer, he can have 2 Particle Beamers. So you're looking at almost a 100-point model just to deny psychic powers and heal. You don't have to buy the Fabricator Claw array, you don't have to buy the Gloom Prism, but if you're not buying those, then you're bringing them for the wrong reasons. You could avoid buying the guns, but it's 24-inch range, Assault 3, so you got 2 of them, Assault 6 at Strength 6. You actually might not need those. And it comes with Automaton Claws, which are Strength User, so 6, AP -2, and D3 damage. Now the one weird thing about this is it kept its Strength and Toughness at 6. Its wounds went down to 4. Actually went up to 4. It had 3 wounds previously, now it's up to 4. Yeah, and it's got 4 attacks too instead of 2. It only had 2 attacks before, now it's got 4. And it's got a 3-up armor save like it did before. The biggest change, like I said previous when I was discussing the Scarabs, is a Scarab Hive. It can only increase the Scarab unit back to its maximum that you paid for. And you roll a D6 still. On a 1, you actually suffered D3 mortal wounds, so you're paying even a heftier price to summon Scarabs. Before, you just took a wound. Now you're taking D3 mortal wounds. I would say that's risky, and the Scarabs are so much faster than the Spider. The Spider's not going to be anywhere near the Scarabs. The Spider's only got a movement of 6, whereas the Scarabs have a movement of 10. It's not going to keep up in any way, shape, or form unless it ran every turn, and the Scarabs more than likely are going to be running as well. So you pretty much bring a Canoptic Spider, maybe just for the Gloom Prism, or the Fabricator Claw array if you want to heal your vehicles. You can bring both. There's no harm in bringing both. They're not that expensive. But if you add the weapons on, then you're paying a hefty price. Next would be, I don't know if it's my favorite change, but it's a really fun change, is the monoliths. Now, you're paying a hefty price for a monolith. I believe it's 380 points base. Yeah, 381 points base for a monolith. But you're paying for 20 wounds, you're paying for a 3-up armor save, and you're paying for toughness 8. So, and living metal. This thing is not going to go down in one turn. It might, it could, but it's got death descending. During deployment, you can set up a monolith in the upper atmosphere instead of placing it on the battlefield. And at the end of any of your movement phases, the monolith can plummet to the battlefield, set it up anywhere on the battlefield that is more than 12 inches away from enemy models. So instead of the normal 9, it has to be 12. But it kept its deep strike, its consistent deep strike. So you can choose to put it maybe in a safe spot where it won't get blown up on turn 1. In addition to that, it's got the Eternity Gate. So when you do set the monolith up, you can set up any number of infantry units on their tomb world, just like the Night Scythe. And you are able to pull it out from the monolith at least at most 3 inches away, 1 inch away from enemy models, before the monolith moves. So just like a normal transport. So at that point, you treat the monolith like a transport, just like you would the Night Scythe. And again, if the monolith is destroyed or all Night Scythes are destroyed, because the cool thing is they share from the same pool of Tomb World stuff. So you could bring a Night Scythe and bring a monolith, and you could deploy stuff around the battlefield very quick, very efficiently. The monolith being an immovable object, and the Night Scythe being something very quickly and get into a position very well. And it helps you again maybe snag the first turn by putting a few of your drops on the Tomb World to bring out later in the game when they're more relevant. And it's got Floating Fortress, so it's got all heavy weapons now. It ignores the -1 to hit when it moves. It's got its Gauss Flux Arcs, all 4 of them, and the Particle Whip. Now the Particle Whip is still 24-inch range, heavy 6, so it's got 6 shots at strength 8 still, -2 AP, D3 each. But the only downside is its ballistic skill 4. Even at full wounds, it's ballistic skill 4. As it takes wounds, it goes up to 5 or goes up to 6. So the Particle Whip's only hitting on 4s, but if you have a Triarch Stalker and you shoot at something, then you're hitting on 4s or rolling 1s. And its Flux Arc, you can fire them normally. There's no ordnance penalty, there's no ordnance holding them back. And they're strength 5 AP -2. They do a lot of damage, and they're heavy 3 still. So you get 12 shots out of that thing at strength 5 -2, 1 damage. They're pretty much Gauss cannons. This thing puts out a lot of firepower. Before, it wouldn't so much. Very reliable. And it's got a Portal of Exile. They brought the Portal of Exile back. When an enemy unit charges this model, its Portal of Exile may activate. Roll a d6, and if it's not wounded at all, or at least it's got more than half its wounds, on a 4-up, the charging unit suffers d6 mortal wounds. And then again, if it's taken more than half wounds, it's a 5-up, or a 6-up if it's at 1 to 5 wounds. But it's durable against shooting, because of its high toughness of 8, and then once it gets into combat, anything that does charge it, not just the first thing that charges it, any enemy unit that charges it takes d6 more wounds on a 4-up. It makes people not want to waste their shots at it, and it makes people not want to charge it. So it just sits there, imposing, putting out a lot of firepower, and pumping out troops every turn too. And when it explodes big. That's pretty much it with this. It's strength, toughness 8, 20 wounds, 3 attacks, leadership 10, 3-up save. This thing's not going down anytime soon. That covers the monolith. I'm going to bring a lot more monoliths, but they are expensive, 381 points. I think it's definitely worth the utility it brings. And then the Annihilation Barge is next for the next heavy support. I can't remember if they were heavy supports before. There being heavy supports now could be a big deal. I don't know. But it's equipped with a Gauss cannon and a twin Tesla destructor, and you're able to take the Gauss cannon out for another Tesla cannon. So it always has a twin Tesla destructor, which is Assault 8. So as opposed to the double Tesla destructor of a Night Scythe, it's just got a twin Tesla destructor, which is the same thing, Assault 8, Strength 7, AP nothing, damage 1, Tesla. Better at killing hordes, or if you're feeling lucky, medium armored things, usually anything with high armor value is going to just ignore Tesla, it won't care. The Gauss cannon is heavy 2, strength 5, -3 D3 damage, which is the exact same weapon as the, destroyers. Same weapon as destroyers. The Tesla cannon is assault 3 as opposed to assault 2 of the Tesla carbine. Strength 6, AP nothing, damage 1. I'd probably stick a Gauss cannon on that every time because Gauss is just so much better than Tesla, I feel. It's got living metal, quantum shielding, and I mean, that's pretty much it. It's just got a lot of shots. You're paying 133 points for this thing, I believe, after everything is said and done. So 133 base. The Twin Tesla Destructor is free because that's the only thing that can really take it. But the Gauss Cannon is 20 points. So you're paying 153 points for this thing. It's gone up in points even more. So the 7th edition was like 120 points. The previous edition of that, it was 90 points. It's pretty durable and it pumps out a lot of shots. In certain scenarios, it might be good to bring. I don't know if I'd bring it every time. I'd much rather have a Triarch Stalker, or I'd much rather have a Monolith, essentially, or a Ghost Arc, if I'm paying for vehicles, that is. The Annihilation Barge is pretty basic, though. It's very identical to what it did before. There's no real changes. But the Doomsday Arc has changed quite a bit. We actually don't have the Doomsday Arc model, but the Doomsday Arc model is the Ghost Arc, same kit. It's got its Doomsday Cannon still, which still has the high power and low power profiles, but it can only fire the high power profile if it hasn't moved. And it's got, so the high power is 72-inch range, heavy D3, strength 10, minus 5 AP. So anything with a 2-up save in cover will actually get no save. Well, get a 6-up save? Yeah, I guess 6-up save. And D6 damage. Now, when it's targeting something that has 10 or more models in a unit, you change it to heavy D6 instead of just heavy D3. The low power profile is 24-inch range, heavy D3, strength 8, minus 2 AP D3 damage with no abilities, and it's kitted out with the same 2 Gauss Fluxer, the 2 flare arrays on the sides that have rapid fire 5. It's got living metal and quantum shielding, 14 wounds, 4-up save, still toughness 6 like the rest of the Necron vehicles. One thing I forgot to mention with the Annihilation Barge, it's got 8 wounds. So it's still a toughness 6 and 4-up save though. The Doomsday Arc hasn't really changed much other than the fact that it does D6 damage, which people probably would have expected out of the Doomsday Cannon anyways. Next up we have our Transcendent Catan. The final Catan. This guy can do some, like, I didn't really care too much for him before. He's got his Necrodermis, 4-up and vulnerable save. Same stat line where it's 7s across the board. He's got 8 wounds, 4 attacks. He can choose a Power of the Catan. His Writhing Worldscape, enemy units within 6 inches of this model do not receive a bonus for being in cover, so he ignores cover, which is nice for his pretty much... Oh, sorry, that affects everyone else too. That's kind of cool. That's a neat little one. He can walk up and give a 6-inch bubble, and if you're ever shooting at that unit, they don't get cover. Reality Unravels, same thing. When he dies, he blows up on a 4-up. Now, the big thing with him is his Crackling Tendrils as his melee weapon. So he's got 4 attacks at strength user, so 7, minus 4 AP. Each one does D6 damage. He could, I don't know, he could go up to something big and just take it out. He does a lot more damage than he did previously in melee, that is. So that's a nice little change. It's nice to see the Transcendent Catan getting a little bit of attention, as opposed to always using most people just use the Nightbringer before. The Nightbringer was the must-bring. Now they all do something different. The Nightbringer's got good shooting. The Deceiver can infiltrate your guys way up the board, and the Transcendent Catan can just straight up destroy something in melee. And last, certainly not least, we have our Lords of War. Boy, do we have to pull these guys like at the back of the shelves. When was the last time you guys seen these played? I don't think I've ever actually even played with one of these. I've never bothered. We'll start with the Obelisk. They're very similar in rules. One has the Transcendent Catan inside of it though, as it did last edition. The Obelisk is strength and toughness 8, 24 wounds. So it's got the same amount of wounds as a Knight, or at least a Knight Warden. And the Monolith's only got 20, so it's got 4 more wounds. Same 3-up save. It's got Living Metal, and it's got Hovering Sentinel. So during deployment, you can set up an Obelisk in the upper atmosphere, just like a Monolith, and you can place it on the battlefield anywhere more than 12 inches away from enemy models. Now it's got Gravity Pulse as well. At the start of your shooting phase, roll a dice for each enemy unit that can fly, and is within the distance specified on the damage table, so 18 inches if it's not wounded, followed by 12 under half, and then 6 at 1/4. Anyways, on a roll of a 6, that unit suffers D3 mortal wounds. So every flyer within 18 inches of an Obelisk suffers D3 mortal wounds on a 6-up. So not super consistent, not super powerful. It always had a thing against flyers in the previous edition, so that's its little change. And then the Tesla Spheres, the 4 Tesla Spheres on the very top of it. They can fire at all arcs now, so fire all. They're Assault 5 still, range 24, Strength 7, AP 0, 1 damage, Tesla. So it's got 20 Tesla shots to Strength 7, which is nothing to scoff at, I suppose, because that could easily become like 30 Tesla shots at Strength 7. So again, vehicles gonna get their saves. Terminator's gonna get their saves. Space Marines are gonna get their saves. I don't know. I don't really like Tesla that much because of the no AP kind of aspect to it. But I guess if you throw enough shots at something's gonna die. And it does have a high strength of 7. That's pretty much it. It's got fly. It's Titanic. It's a vehicle. Nothing really changed with it. And of course, the points for an Obelisk is 426. It's, what is that, 45 points more than a Monolith? And you're not really getting a whole lot extra out of it because the Monolith can at least bring units onto the battlefield in its position. I don't want to say anything bad about the Obelisk, but it's 100% terrible. I don't know, maybe I'm wrong. The Tesseract Vault is a Monolith, is an Obelisk, but bam! It's got all the Obelisk rules, so it has it's got not all the Obelisk rules, it has the Obelisk profile. Instead, it's only toughness 7 because it's opened up. The Obelisk itself is toughness 8, the Monolith is toughness 8, this thing's only toughness 7 because you kind of treat the toughness of the Catan inside, which is 7. It's got 3 up armor save, 28 wounds though, so it's got 4 more wounds. And the 4 Tesla Spears around the sides of it, Living Metal, and Vengeance of the Enchained, which is, if this model is reduced to 0 wounds, roll a d6. On a 4-up, the Transcendent Catan inside, it blows up 2d6 instead of the normal distance for d6 mortal wounds as well. So this thing blows up pretty big, but and it actually blows up on a 4-up, where most things blow up on a 6-up. So it's got the Catan kind of blow up thing. And it's got powers of the Catan as well, but it knows all of the powers of the Catan. So it can shoot, it can use and shoot all of the powers of the Catan in the table. So all 3. So it's got Time's Arrow, the Antimatter Meteor, and the other assault one. I can't remember, but it can shoot all 3 of it. Would it be worth its heaping point costs of, I don't know, 496? Probably no. But you could bring it for fun. It's got 28 wounds, so it's not going to go down anytime soon. Only toughness 7, though. Going from toughness 8 to toughness 7 is a massive deal, because all of a sudden strength 4 is winning it on 5s. All of a sudden, like, strength 8 is winning it on 3s. I mean, these have never been really popular models. They should have buffed these guys out the wazoo so everyone would buy them, because we have 4, so that means I could use them. But no, they're not really that great. These got, again, the 20 Tesla shots, all 3 powers of the Catan. It actually moves 30 inches a turn, eh? Whoa, wow, 30-inch move is a pretty big move. That's interesting. Maybe that could be a big deal. Huh. You know what? I will use this in one game. I will use this Tesseract Vault in one game I play, and we'll see how that goes. But that's going to conclude our general overview of the Necron, or the index containing Necrons. So Xenos 1 part Necrons, I suppose. The next part, it'll be about a 30-minute segment with Cullen and myself, and we are going to go over some strategy and interactions and lists you could build for different point values or against different types of armies. So if you're fighting a more elite army, or if you're fighting a horde army, or if you're fighting a vehicle-heavy army, you get the idea. But that will be in the vault. And if you want to click on the link in the video description below, you can sign yourself up for a 7-day free trial to be a vault member to catch all of the faction focus reviews and all of the new 8th edition battle reports that are coming out. Because again, whenever we do one battle report, we throw another one in the vault for our vault members. Hope you guys enjoyed it. Hope it was insightful. I know I love Necrons. I assume anyone who is playing Necrons is watching this. And yeah, I hope I got everything right. I'm pretty sure I did. Anyways, guys, happy wargaming.